Thousands of years ago, someone picked up a quill, a reed, or a chisel and wrote down something so important that it outlasted empires and wars. These writings even outlived the memory of the people who created them. Some of these texts held secrets their authors took to the grave. Others lay buried underground for centuries until a chance discovery forced scholars to rethink everything they knew about the past. Today we're looking at 7 ancient scrolls, books, and inscriptions, each of which turned our understanding of entire eras upside down. These aren't legends or fantasies, they're real artifacts you can see in museums and read about in academic catalogues. In July of 1799, French soldiers were reinforcing the walls of an old fort near the Egyptian city of Rosetta. An officer named Pierre-François Bouchard noticed a strange slab of dark stone embedded in the wall, covered with 3 different kinds of writing. The stone weighed around 1,650 pounds and was carved from granodiorite, a rock so hard it survived 2,000 years virtually undamaged. The top section was covered in hieroglyphs. The middle contained Demotic script. The bottom was written in ancient Greek. The soldiers had no idea they were holding the key to one of the ancient world's greatest mysteries. By that point, no one on Earth had been able to read Egyptian hieroglyphs for almost 1,400 years. The last known hieroglyphic inscription had been carved around 400 AD in the Temple of Isis on the island of Philae. After that, the knowledge simply vanished. Thousands of inscriptions on the walls of pyramids and tombs became beautiful but silent pictures. The first scholars who examined the stone figured the decryption would take a couple of weeks. After all, the Greek portion was perfectly readable. But the task stretched on for 23 years and turned into a race between 2 geniuses. The Englishman Thomas Young was the first to figure out that the hieroglyphs inside oval frames, known as cartouches, represented the sounds of the royal name Ptolemy. The final breakthrough came from a Frenchman, Jean-François Champollion. He had studied ancient languages since childhood and was already reading Greek by the age of 10. On September 14, 1822, Champollion burst into his brother's office, shouting, "I've got it!" and promptly fainted from exhaustion. He had grasped the key insight. Hieroglyphs worked simultaneously as pictures and as sounds. It wasn't just a system of symbols, it was a sophisticated language with multiple ways to write the same word. After this discovery, the silent walls of Egyptian temples began to speak. The story of a civilization stretching back 5,000 years unfolded before humanity. A single stone found in the wall of a crumbling fort gave us the voice of a people who had been silent for 14 centuries. Today, the Rosetta Stone stands in the British Museum in London and is the most visited exhibit in the entire collection. The next find didn't happen in a library or a temple. It happened at an ancient garbage dump. In 1897, 2 young researchers from Oxford, Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt, travelled to the Egyptian city of Oxyrhynchus. They had expected to find manuscripts in temple ruins. Instead, they turned their attention to some unremarkable sandy hills outside of town. Beneath those hills lay garbage heaps where city residents had been tossing unwanted papers for an entire millennium. The dump had been accumulating from the 2nd century BC through the 6th century AD. When workers started digging, papyri came pouring out. Grenfell wrote in his report that the stream turned into a genuine waterfall. On just the 2nd day of excavation, they found a fragment of the New Testament nearly 2,000 years old. In total, more than 500,000 fragments were pulled from the ground. It became the largest collection of ancient manuscripts ever discovered. Among the trash they found, lost comedies by Menander, poems by Sappho, early copies of the New Testament, and previously unknown sayings attributed to Jesus. Works that scholars had given up as lost forever had been sitting in a landfill for 1,500 years. The dry desert climate preserved them better than any purpose-built archive ever could. As of today, roughly 5,000 documents have been deciphered and published, but that's only a fraction of the collection. The remaining fragments are still stored in boxes at Oxford University, waiting their turn. Among them could be lost works by Sophocles, Euripides, or entire books no one knows ever existed. The story of Oxyrhynchus proves something paradoxical. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't kept in golden vaults. They're found in what people threw away. In March of 1952, archaeologists were exploring Cave 3 near Qumran on the shore of the Dead Sea. Among the usual leather and papyrus scrolls, they stumbled on something unusual. 2 rolls forged from thin sheets of copper mixed with tin. The copper scrolls were so badly oxidized that unrolling them without destroying them was impossible. In 1955, they were cut into 23 strips at a laboratory in Manchester. Only then could scholars read the text. The contents had nothing in common with the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which contained religious texts, prayers, and prophecies. Even the Hebrew in the scroll was different from the language of the other Qumran manuscripts, pointing to a different era and a different author. The copper scroll turned out to be a list of 64 hidden stashes containing enormous quantities of gold and silver. One entry reads, "In the burial monument of Ben Rabbah in Beth Shad, 100 ingots of gold." Another points to a cellar with 40 talents of silver hidden beneath the steps of a salt pit. The total weight of the treasure is estimated at dozens of tons of precious metal, worth billions of dollars at today's prices. Someone hid this wealth so carefully that they engraved the map not on fragile parchment, but on metal built to survive millennia. One of the most convincing theories links the treasure to the Bar Kokhba revolt against Rome in 132 AD. The rebels collected gold for a war they believed would be the final battle between good and evil. They hammered the coordinates into copper so the information would survive even if everyone who knew about it was wiped out. Since 1962, dozens of expeditions have tried to find at least one of the stashes. All have come back empty-handed. The descriptions are written as though the reader knows the landscape intimately. In the cave of the old laundry, on the 3rd terrace. Without a point of reference, directions like these are meaningless. In over 70 years of searching, not a single coin has been found. The oldest treasure map in the world has yet to lead anyone to a single discovery, and no one knows whether the gold ever actually existed. In December of 1945, an Egyptian peasant named Muhammad al-Saman was digging for fertilizer at the base of a cliff near the town of Nag Hammadi. His shovel struck a sealed clay jar. Inside lay 13 leather-bound codices containing more than 50 texts. The manuscripts were written in Coptic and dated to the 4th century, but they were copies of much earlier works. Among the finds was the Gospel of Thomas, 114 sayings of Jesus with no narrative about the crucifixion or resurrection. There was also the Gospel of Mary, in which Mary Magdalene is presented as the closest disciple, one who received secret teachings unavailable to the other apostles. These books belong to the Gnostics, an early Christian movement that the Orthodox Church declared heretical and systematically destroyed over the course of centuries. Before this discovery, virtually everything known about the Gnostics came from their opponents. Judging an entire movement based on what its enemies said is like reconstructing a defendant's story using only the prosecutor's closing argument. The codices revealed that early Christianity was a colorful world of competing ideas, a world where women could be spiritual leaders, and salvation was achieved not through sacrifice, but through inner knowledge. Someone hid these books around 390 AD, when the church began standardizing its canon and destroying everything that didn't fit. For 1,500 years they lay in a clay jar until a peasant's shovel gave the world back the voice of those who had been silenced. In 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich purchased a strange manuscript in Italy that has carried his name ever since. The Voynich manuscript contains 230 pages of text in an unknown language, accompanied by illustrations of plants that don't exist in nature. Some pages fold out into multi-page panoramas, a rarity for a 15th century manuscript. Radiocarbon analysis in 2009 dated the parchment to between 1404 and 1438. The ink also proved authentic, completely ruling out a modern forgery. The manuscript contains around 38,000 words. Their patterns are consistent with a real language that has actual grammar. The world's top cryptographers have taken a crack at it, including codebreakers from both world wars. All of them failed. Modern machine learning algorithms haven't been able to break the cipher either. This creates a paradox. The text behaves like a genuine language with its own statistics and structure, but no known language matches it. Handwriting analysis suggests the manuscript may have been written by 2 or even 5 different scribes, which complicates the hoax theory. In 2025, researchers developed a cipher called NAB, based on medieval card games, which transforms ordinary Latin text into something remarkably similar to the Voynich language, though this still doesn't count as a decryption. The manuscript is housed at Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, right here in the United States. It remains the only medieval book that humanity has never been able to read. Whoever created it buried its message so deep that 500 years of technological progress haven't been enough to reach it. In the early 13th century, in a monastery in Bohemia, part of what is now the Czech Republic, someone created the largest handwritten book of the Middle Ages. The Codex Gigas, Latin for giant book, stands nearly 3 feet tall and weighs close to 165 pounds. Creating it required the hides of 160 donkeys. The total parchment area exceeds 460 square feet. But the book became famous not for its size. It became famous for the full-page portrait of the devil on page 290. A horned figure with a forked tongue and claws, dressed in an ermine loincloth, stares at the reader from an empty space between 2 towers. On the facing page is an equally large depiction of the heavenly city. And what's most unsettling is that this paradise shows not a single sign of life. Medieval legend says the book was written by a monk named Herman the Recluse, sentenced to be walled up alive for breaking his vows. To save himself, he promised to create in a single night a book containing all the knowledge of the world. But by midnight, he realized he wouldn't make it and summoned the devil for help. Researchers have determined that the handwriting across all 620 pages belongs to a single person and never changes, as though the author never aged. The realistic time frame for creating it was between 20 and 30 years of continuous work at about 3 hours a day. In addition to the complete Latin Bible, the book includes the Encyclopedia of Isidore of Seville, medical treatises, a Czech chronicle, and formulas for exorcising evil spirits. It was an attempt to fit all human knowledge into a single volume, a kind of medieval internet bound in leather. In 1594, the book was taken by Emperor Rudolph II, known for his obsession with the occult. His fixation on the manuscript reportedly contributed to his own family removing him from power. Swedish troops carried the Codex out of Prague in 1648 as a spoil of the 30 Years' War. It still resides in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm. During a fire at Stockholm Castle in 1697, the book was saved by being thrown out a window. In the fall, it lost several pages that apparently contained the rule of the Benedictine order. No one knows who cut those pages out or why. They had vanished before the fire. That remains a separate mystery of the manuscript. The emerald tablet, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, was for centuries considered the key to all the secrets of the universe. The earliest versions appear in Arabic alchemical treatises from the 7th and 8th centuries, most notably the Book of the Secret of Creation. According to legend, the text was found on an emerald slab in the hands of a dead elder sitting on a golden throne in a crypt beneath a statue of Hermes. The tablet opens with what became the most quoted line in the history of the occult. As above, so below. Isaac Newton translated the emerald tablet from Latin into English in his own hand. That manuscript is still preserved in the library of King's College, Cambridge. Newton took alchemy seriously. He copied treatises by hand because he considered them a valuable source of knowledge about nature. Roger Bacon, Albertus Magnus, and John Dee, some of the most brilliant minds of their respective eras, studied the tablet and wrote commentaries on it. Medieval alchemists saw it as an instruction manual for creating the philosopher's stone and turning lead into gold. In the 20th century, Carl Jung interpreted the text as a description of psychological processes related to the unification of opposites within the human psyche. The paradox of the tablet is that every generation finds in it exactly what it's looking for. Alchemists saw the formula for gold. Mystics found the path to enlightenment. Scientists discovered the seeds of the scientific method. A text that fits on half a page gave rise to a tradition that eventually grew into modern chemistry. The Emerald Tablet doesn't contain answers, but it compels everyone who reads it to ask the kind of questions that have driven science forward for 1,000 years. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ed Dib threw a rock into a cave on the shore of the Dead Sea and heard the sound of breaking pottery. He had been looking for a goat that had wandered from the herd. Instead of the animal, he stumbled onto a find that would end up in every history textbook. Inside were clay jars containing leather scrolls that came to be known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century. Over the course of 9 years, more than 900 manuscripts in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek were found in 11 caves near Qumran. Among them was the Great Isaiah Scroll, a complete copy of the biblical book 1,000 years older than any previously known text of the Old Testament. Before the discovery, the earliest manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible dated to around 1000 AD. The Qumran scrolls pushed that date back by an entire millennium. A comparison revealed an astonishing accuracy in how the text had been transmitted across the centuries. But differences were found too. The scrolls of Exodus and Samuel contained passages missing from later versions. This meant that in ancient times, several parallel editions of the Bible existed. The version we know today was only one of them. The scrolls also shed light on the Essenes, a religious sect that had withdrawn into the desert to await the end of days. Their war scroll describes an apocalyptic battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, revealing just how diverse religious life in ancient Judea really was. The story of the scrolls after their discovery proved almost as dramatic as their contents. 4 of the first scrolls were sold through a classified ad in the Wall Street Journal. The archaeologist Yigael Yadin purchased them on behalf of the State of Israel. Today, they are housed in the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. As recently as 2021, new fragments were discovered containing texts from the books of Zechariah and Nahum. The Dead Sea Scrolls prove that the past is never fully explored, because the earth keeps giving back what was entrusted to it for safekeeping. Each of the 7 texts we've covered was impossible in its own way. The Rosetta Stone gave voice to a civilization that had been silent for 14 centuries. The Oxyrhynchus Papyri resurrected poets buried in a garbage dump. The Copper Scroll described a treasure that may no longer exist. The Nag Hammadi codices preserved the thoughts of people someone tried to erase from history. The Voynich Manuscript issued a challenge that 500 years of technological progress still hasn't met. The Codex Gigas became one man's monument to obsession, and it has outlasted empires. The Emerald Tablet showed that half a page of text can fuel humanity's imagination for 1,000 years. All of these discoveries share one simple thing. Someone decided that a thought was worth writing down, and they were right. Stone, metal, and parchment preserved that thought longer than the kingdoms of the people who wrote it. We like to think that knowledge accumulates in a straight line, from simple to complex. But every scroll pulled from the ground proves the opposite. Knowledge gets lost, it gets hidden, it gets forgotten, and then it's found again in the most unexpected places. Maybe the most important text in human history is still lying somewhere underground, waiting for its shepherd, its construction worker, or its farmer with a shovel. And the only thing it takes to find it is to never stop digging.